I'm here with Peter Schreier at the Winter Garden Heritage Foundation, and we actually have quite a history together, Peter and the foundation. He has been photographing West Orange County and Winter Garden for decades, and we have been privileged to feature a lot of shows with him featuring his photographic work. So, Peter, I know you for like over 40 years.
I know. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the opportunity to be in another show in Winter Garden. It's always a good time, you know?
Yep. And we still refer to your work, as you know, with citations because we've scanned, your collections into our archive, for example.
Yeah.
You've worked with East Winter Garden, and you did, you'll tell us about that as you go along. And you're very big, of course, with Creole Day. That's your baby. And we'll get to that too. But tell me, what drew you to Winter Garden back in the early 1980s?
Well, I was a transplant, believe it or not, from Switzerland. I'd settled in Central Florida. And, at the time, I didn't really have the means to travel much in the United States as I've done since. So I did a lot of traveling and exploring as a young photographer in Florida. And I was really looking for authentic small towns. Places that were not just shopping centers, and because all that was just really blowing up, at the time. And being from Europe, that's not the kind of city and community that I was used to. So I literally followed the road map one day. I wanted to explore Lake Apopka and the south end of this community that was here. And I came across Winter Garden. It was on a weekend, and I found this wonderful, old town that kind of looked like the old American movies that were made in the 40s and 50s that I grew up with on Swiss television, because we had very small television program, and that's all they'd afford is 20, 30-year-old American movies to watch, which we loved, And that's how I first came here. And then when I was a fairly new teacher at Creole Day School of Art in Winter Park, I taught a course on social landscape photography, and I wanted to do a field trip with my students to a community that was authentic, that showed some old and some new and some transition, and also had an interesting natural landscape nearby. So, Winter Garden was the perfect place. So I came out here on a Saturday morning, and we found both. And I have literally brought students out to photograph in Winter Garden ever since. And that's how really my own photography first started developing, many of the places that now look quite different.
Yeah, and I got to say, a lot of people wrote off West Orange County in those decades, but without seeming too fulsome, you caught the beauty even in the downside.
Thank you.
Those photographs really capture a time and a place of what was and eventually what could be. So you were there right in the beginning.
It was a very special time, and I refer to it sometimes as when you came to downtown Winter Garden, you couldn't get a cup of coffee after 5 o'clock, and that's true. And of course, you have beautiful wine bars and everything else now. But a wonderful thing that happened as a documentary photographer. Of course, nothing thrills me more than working on a contemporary project and getting the support. Especially working with a city or with a historical association like yours, but it's also really nice to see that people appreciate the work that you did a long time ago. And when I did all that early work in the 80s and into the 90s in Winter Garden, I exhibited it here and there in different shows, but never actually here in Winter Garden. So the people from here never really got to see it. And then the wonderful thing happened when I worked with Kay Kappelman in 2009. Your former director on another project, the Photographic Oral History Project. Kay made this statement. She said, well, we don't have a lot of photography of the 1980s, so we kind of call it the lost decades. I don't think anybody really came and photographed here. And I kind of said, I did. I said, you do? I said, and then she talked to, I'm not sure if it was Mike Bullhofer at the city, someone at the city, and the city was interested. So they said, show us everything you have from that period. And then that, came to that exhibit that we call The Lost Decades, and the city basically acquiring, some of that
That's
work.
on display at City Hall, correct?
It's permanent. They have it, mostly I think on the second floor.
Right.
And it's a lot of the photographs from around Plant Street, Lake Apopka, the different areas, the businesses that are gone now, and so forth. But also at the same time, you look at some of them, and you can sort of, as a city, be proud. But because it's still recognizable.
Yeah, it's
you
still
haven't
there.
developed it to a point
Right.
where it's not recognizable
Right.
anymore. you know.
Things were kept.
Yeah.
up. It's true.
Yeah.
And the Lost Decades, you're going to be featuring some of those prints in the
Some of
Color
those,
Hall
yes,
exhibit.
yes,
Yeah. And
yes.
also from, what are some of the other exhibits you want to tell
The
our
other
folks?
project will be from East Winter Garden, your historic African American community, where I was commissioned in 96, 97 by Linda Chapin, who was then the county chairwoman of Orange County, on a project where I was able to photograph different small communities in Orange County. Not the kind of community that Orange County is really known for, more of the older communities.
Right, that's this book.
Winter Garden
It's
was
the book.
one of them, and especially the East Side community, which is the historic African American community. It was a wonderful project. Book was published, and a permanent installation was created at the Maxey Community Center, which is an old movie theater, and where Crealde also teaches art classes
Right,
now.
exactly.
I came out of that relationship, and that's just been a project of a lot of pride, because whenever I go to the Maxey Center, people somehow recognize me that I'm the person who made those photographs more than 20 years ago, and I know that it has a lot of meaning, and it was a very special opportunity for me because I made so many wonderful friends and and relationships, and I felt at times people have told me, and that's kind of like a really humbling experience for a documentarian, is that people have said to me, we don't think anybody has ever really spent substantial time here photographing our community. And there was so much richness in that community that was sort of fighting for survival, as an old community. So it was so some of that work will be on display. There'll be Mrs. Dixon, which is everybody knows. In Winter Garden, I did a portrait of her in front of the street sign with the street that's named after her, with the development behind it that she helped develop, and so forth. And there's several other wonderful people, and also places and locations.
I know you did in the update of the East, you did a beautiful portrait of Charlie May Wilder.
I did.
The church?
Yes, at the
I
church.
love that photograph.
And that church is the same church, New Bethlehem, which I photographed in the first project. And then the great opportunity came, 2 or 3 years ago, when I again worked with the city and with your foundation and the museum to go back to the neighborhood and revisit and not photograph the same places or the same people, but photograph individuals today that have a big impact, like Mrs. Wilder and a couple of the business owner, or Captain Anthony Dawkins, I think the policeman that sort of epitomizes that ideal relationship for a community to have with law enforcement.
Exactly.
Law enforcement, that's a friend. Law enforcement that is from the community and understands the community.
You caught that.
Yeah.
Speaking of the East Side and Maxey Community Center, I find that so fascinating. How did you all get to teaching here at Jesse Brock and Maxey? How did you basically built an arm of Crealde?
I know. Winter Park is 25 miles from here,
exactly.
And we've always had some students from here and also from even further, Leesburg and Claremont, but it's a haul to come there, So what's interesting is that a lot of people don't know that the two programs that we do, the first one that's actually much older, it predates the other one by more than a decade, is the free program at the Maxey Center.
Sure, Maxey.
Because we had done similar work, after-school program for kids, in other similar communities in Central Florida. And it's really through the relationship with the people that I met doing the photography there and to Linda Chapin's office that the opportunity arose. I said, maybe Crealde could come out and do some after-school free classes for the kids from the neighborhood who've never had such a program. And that was in 1998.
Yeah, it's
We've been there
more than
23 years.
23
Our
years.
current teachers there, Patricia Byron, has been there for more than a decade. teaching. And of course, that program sadly is still on hold because of COVID, because the center has not.
It'll be back.
Has not opened, but it will be back. You know, and we'll be ready. And you know, we have work on display there that the kids have done under Miss Patricia, and my work is there. And then many years later, another conversation took place to start tuition-driven classes for adults at another community center here, the Jesse Brock Center. And that was in 11 years ago, in 2010. Crealde started working with the staff there. And we have several classes every week since then. And it's been a wonderful thing to bring Crealde, you know, as one of your Sofidi officials said, you know, bring the Crealde brand out here to Winter Garden. And then what happens, you know, when people have had the classes that we have here, which is limited, we have, of course, a lot more facility in Winter Park, then people are willing to do the trek to come over. So I think it's been a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and they see a whole new world when they come out west. Yeah, now that people are coming out to the west is good.
Yeah.
Do you have if I may ask, a future project? What is your next endeavor? If you're able to talk about it.
The one thing I wanted to mention before we go to that too is that the third body of work, that selections is from Trailer City. And that's just a project that's really dear to my heart. I've always wanted to do, I think every, you know, photographer has these projects. One day I'm going to do this and that. I always thought I'm going to do a trailer park one year, and I had my eye on Trailer City. And then finally in 2005 I did it, and I spent a year on and off photographing there. So a few of these images, and they're from my personal collection. They'll be on display too.
You know that was a WPA project,
I know.
Of course, under Mayor Walker.
I know.
Yeah. Government funds.
And you know, at one time I wasn't so sure if it was going to survive, but I think it's going to be there forever. You know,
so everyone loves it. Everyone knows of it. Yeah,
it's part of your community.
Exactly.
And it's part of Florida history. You know.
Exactly. From
an old tin camp to a retirement haven for auto workers from the Midwest. That was sort of the profile that I found out. You know, from several that I met. You know.
All marketing, right? It's all the marketing. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add that I
might
have missed?
No, it's just an honor to be here and to be showing with Kathy and the other artists. And you know, I'm not a resident of Winter Garden, but I've always loved it, and it's sort of like a second home.
Yeah, you know? I can empathize almost along the same lines as yourself. Back in the 80s, I was drawn to this area, and it was a whole different world, you know, from what I'm used to on the east side, just like yourself. And it warranted attention.
It's a special place, just the way you make relationships and the way you connect with people, that you literally can walk down the street, you know. I mean, I remember when I looked for an opportunity to show the Trailer City project, because I had received the United Arts grant, and one of the conditions was to do a show. And of course, every artist wants to do a show. And I could have done it in Winter Park, but I wanted to do it here. Well, you don't have a gallery in every corner, you know, and he didn't have the Art Association yet, you know, and that was 14, 15 years ago. And then being in a conversation with the city and with Mike Bullhover, and a half an hour later, we're walking down Main Street, and he's introducing me to people. And that's how I met Kay Kappelman. And at the time, they were working with the Edgewater Hotel, and they ended up turning, for my show, the lobby of the Edgewater Hotel into a gallery. I mean, where else is something like this going to happen?
There was so much potential, and people just realized it. And I think being a member of the arts community, I mean, art just reaches everybody. And I think you've done such a great job of preserving this area's legacy and history through your photography.
Well, thank you. And I hope I can continue working here and doing projects here. The lake, I know the cleanup of the lake I know that's happening. I have an interest in that. And I also think there's still more history here in the different parts of the city, especially with some of the elderly, that I really feel needs to be recorded because, you know, like when I look back at some of the work that I did 20 years ago, I didn't know at the time how fast some of it would disappear.
True. You realize that as we get older, we make a point, if I get visitors here at the office and they're older folks, I write down everything they share with me.